30 seconds. All right, we got more people. Hurry up, guys. It's not like we're waiting for you or nothing, you know. It's your call, dude. Are these guys here for the right presentation? They showed up late. All right, this is good. You guys here for like supply chain threat intelligence? Yeah? No? Okay. That happened to me once. We switched talks. Half the audience was there for the other talk that was scheduled for the morning, and like just they all left. Like, all right, confidence way down. All right, should we get started? Let's do it, because I'm going to run over time. Are you recording? All right, make sure Adrian cuts that off. 3-second pause. Welcome. We are going to be talking about building a usable mobile data protection strategy. That means something different to almost everybody here. We're all using mobile devices. I gotta ask, who does not have a smartphone? Who's still maybe using something that doesn't have like that smart operating system? It could be a burner phone. Anybody? We all have smartphones here. Am I missing anyone? Right. So this is pretty much relevant to all of us. We're all employed, right? If you're a student, relevant to a degree. If you're employed and you're responsible for your company's data, this is highly relevant to you. And I call this it's okay, nobody's watching you. Nobody's looking at you right now. I'm not helping at all, am I? I call this the vendor no pitch pitch. I work for a vendor, and my day-to-day responsibilities are helping organizations coming up with these kinds of strategies. And I realize there's a lot of people, there's gaps in a tremendous amount of knowledge for things that have been around for like 3 years, and they're like, no, I never heard of that before. Tell me about iOS device supervision. And it's been around for a long time. So I want to try to maybe like broadcast this further to a larger audience. So I'm really pitching a solution, and the solution is an MDM or EMM, mobile device management, enterprise mobile management. But it's if there's any solutions I'm pitching sounds like a mobile iron solution, it's by coincidence. I'm not trying to pitch that this is the best thing for you, but you should be using something, and if you're not, this is the talk for you. If you are, and you're kind of like stalling on where to go because you're still missing pieces, this is the talk for you. And if you're here for supply chain threat intelligence, this is the talk for you. So I kind of live and breathe this. If you follow me on Twitter, it's kind of the one that's pinned. There's a lot of truth in this, right? For a long time, these mobile devices, they were the target. I remember 2014, and things kind of turned around where the devices having a high asset value were the target of attack. People wanted to get them. They didn't really have passcodes. You're going to get data, maybe some credentials. You can get into their mail, and you kind of get all this stuff you could use. But then I remember hearing the FBI give a talk that they're getting more and more reports that the devices are not necessarily being stolen for the device, but to get into the cloud storage providers. They were trying to break in or get somebody's account, and then if they had a lot of corporate personal data or financial information, that was much more valuable. And I was like, that makes a lot of sense. And it's fucking scary, because now it's like if they break in, you might not know. If your device is gone, you kind of know, right? It's one of those sayings like CSCs. The first thing is inventory your assets. If you know where they are, they could be secure. But if you don't know where they are, it's absolutely insecure. And these guys are after you. They're after you. If you don't have a healthy paranoia that at this moment somebody's trying to do something, whether it's automation or an actual person, it's not something wrong with me. There's something wrong with you. It's a healthy paranoia. Do you have to live your life not being able to go to bed? No, go to sleep. But you got to be mindful that if something is happening and it's not something you've solicited and it's not something that feels right, it's not right. Don't just accept it. I got a good story for that, but I don't have a lot of time. Good story, short version. We were in Asia, my wife and my family. I was trying to book a hotel for my wife who had a layover in China. I got a phone call from my credit card company saying, do you want to approve this call, like this credit card charge for China? And I said no, and my wife didn't have a hotel. Short story. So, let me introduce you to Mike. I am Dave Schwartzberg. I go by Heal with Hands. Why do I go by Heal with Hands? First of all, it's an old Dungeons & Dragons character name I created when I was like an early teenager. And then later in life, I learned nobody else is using it. So I'm almost always guaranteed to have that username. And now you're all going to go and register Heal with Hands somewhere and screw me over. I got about 2 decades of experience in the security field, trained ethical mobile hacker at Mobile Iron, manager of security and privacy. And a lot of the time, that's a pretty fun thing because I have opportunities to do stuff like this and speak with great folks like yourselves. Started Hack for Kids back in 2014. You guys probably heard of Hack for Kids. Give it up, my volunteer. Thank you. He's helped us out. Any other volunteers here? A little recognition? No. I'm also very active with First Lego League. I'm a coach. I got a team that Hack for Kids sponsors. So we meet 3 times a week. Right now we're in like the middle of a season. I'm an assistant scoutmaster. If you haven't seen me walking around wearing the other shirt, it's the Hacker Scout, but I'm really involved with scouting. I do different kinds of merit badges. In addition to the 4 up there, I'm also like a chess and public speaking merit badge counselor. Imagine that. And a lot of other different things, like wood badge trained, very active. It's like my second job, scouting. Why do you care? The message really here is, I'm really busy. I got 3 kids, 12, 10, and 5, and a family that wants to go on vacations, and I have all these other interests and activities and hobbies. In addition to working at Mobile Iron, I make the time to try to make a difference in the world, trying to make the future better. Find something that you're good at, and find a way that you can make the contribution that you can. I'm not saying full-on volunteer, stop everything that you're doing and go forward, but if there's somebody that could use a little help, and you know how to help them, how much of that day is that going to take away from you? Maybe a few minutes, maybe an hour, but pay it forward. We all work in a field where we make fairly good living, except for maybe the students who just got a job and pay your dues like the rest of us. You'll get there. But I appreciate the little chuckles. But pay it forward. And if we're all paying it forward, then the world will be a better place. And stop shit posting. If you want to find me online, there's my Twitter handle. I'm also on LinkedIn. So, let's talk about mobility. What do you see here? Just shout it out. It doesn't matter what you say, just shout it out. Shortcut. What's that? A quad? Oh, like in a campus. It's close. Okay, anything else? Shortened path, beaten path, what else? People not using the sidewalk. Your lack of participation means I'm going to have to call on volunteers, mind you. Trees. Grass. Beautiful, sir. Very observant man. You're going to think I'm crazy. Yes. Smart people noticing a shortcut. There's some wisdom in that. And efficiency. You didn't have to raise your hand, but that was good. You're going to think I'm crazy, but you know what I see? Mobility. Look at it a little more closely. There's not a cell phone on the grass. Look at it a little bit more closely. Let's talk about mobility. So mobility is essentially a platform for developers to build their wonderful, beautiful apps. The wonderful, beautiful apps could be trees and grass. And there might be things that help with productivity and efficiency. And when they first built it, they said, well, we want to keep the beauty pristine, so we're going to put some pavers down, make a nice path, put one on the other side. You can see one kind of in the back, or in like almost in the middle in the back. And they said, this is beautiful. This is what we want. We're going to make it free. But if people want to do something like a party, maybe we'll charge a little something for that. That's like an in-app purchase. And then now they're going to have something that everybody can appreciate together. And we can all communicate and have a great time and be a part of this wonderful community. You don't see that? Anyone? No? Well, they did that, and then someone put in a damn bus stop. And the people going through that beautiful app said, you know what? I want to do things my way. Consumerization of IT. I'm going to go and walk down this path, shadow IT, because I want to get there more efficiently and be more productive because that's good for me. I don't care about anybody else. When I go to work, I want to use the device I want to use. I want to get my email. I want to get every other tool that I need to use. Do you see mobility now? You don't, okay, I got a yes and I got a Open your mind up a little bit. So does it make a little bit of sense? So there's mobility. And the real important message is that mobility is going to happen anyway. It's going to happen by you, with you, or to you. Where do you want to be? By you is kind of like the old school IT. I come from a world of Novell NetWare 3.0 and Windows for workgroups and no TCP/IP. It was all IPX, SPX. It was the good old days. And then, damn, this protocol. Adoption grew. And things changed, and things got better for the most part. But we were able to control what was going on in our LAN. So it was happening by us. And then we had to start to be a little bit more sensitive to the users and do things with them. Go to the lines of business. What do you need? We'll build something for you. Right? You want people to get involved a little bit, be a stakeholder. But now, a lot of the times mobility is happening to IT. And IT, unfortunately, doesn't always have the power or the authority to make the change. And sometimes when that momentum builds, is it an easy thing to stop? Who's ever given users privileges and then had to take them away? That's a fun conversation, right? A lot of whining involved and emails and management getting involved to justify the decision. So there's a big shift, as you already know, going from what we've been doing for decades and even from like the first iPhone. Does anybody know when the first iPhone came out? Raise your hand if you know. I don't have anything for you, but I'll just give you. Sorry? 10 years ago is good guess. Do you know the month? Anyone? Yes. Of what year? Ago. Yes, 2027 we'll have the first iPhone. It was 2007, right? Do you guys know, like right now, if you have an iPhone, like you got a lot of pages, right? How many pages did that first iPhone happen to have, excuse me? 1 page. No apps are being developed yet. How about Android? Do you guys know when Android came out? 8 September. Do you guys know how like Android has these like really cool code names and stuff? Do you know what the first Android's code name was? Anyone? I wish I had shit to throw at you. None. It's a trick question, and none existed for it. Then they started to come up with these great names that either sounded like strippers or prostitutes. But like honeycomb, gingerbread, ice cream sandwich, lollipop, marshmallow. I mean, is it me? It's cute. It's fun. But what's the point there? So over the past 10 years, more and more this shift is like, how do we get this legacy technology to work on the modern platform? Right? Even like if you're running Windows 10, you can install like APPX files. Those are like modern apps versus like MSI and XEs, which are considered legacy. So with this shift, we all have to be prepared for it. We have to come up with some kind of strategy, because on mobile, it's really easy for data to spray almost anywhere on the internet. There are some compensating controls built in the OS, but a lot of people aren't really using them properly. So when you look at what are the modern like characteristics of computing, there's essentially 3. I kind of said the first one, right? Data is everywhere. You could say it's not, but I think you might be kidding yourself. You could put some controls, but for the most part for the conversation, let's just say data is everywhere. It's going to be in the cloud, on somebody's server that you'll never see. It's still on some of the desktops. It could be on the laptops that are leaving the office, getting through the guest Wi-Fi. And it's definitely in the hands of the users. So whoever here is also working and checking email, and maybe you open up a PDF or something to look at it or some other attachment, the data is there on the device. Or even if you open something up and you close it, and it was the last thing you see, you put your phone to sleep, iOS takes a screenshot of that. Like when you flip through your apps, you're looking at a screenshot of the last time you used that app. There might be data. So sometimes when you want it, you want a nice app that does like a little obfuscation before the screenshot. Some of them do that. It's kind of cool. But that's essentially a screenshot, and if somebody gets on your device and knows where to find those files and pull them off, you might have sensitive information on there. Maybe your bank account number or balance or passwords. Maybe you have a password list on there. So that's part of the characteristics. And by the way, there's going to be a lot more of these kinds of things. Get to the charger. If you can't laugh at this, you don't have a sense of humor. I mean, this is funny stuff. And then there's choice. This is kind of like the cornerstone of mobile. The users get to choose, but we want to have them choose things that we make available to them. That should be a part of your strategy of you want to be able to access your payroll information from your phone, but let's give you a managed app so that when you leave, we could pull that off so there's nothing residing behind in a SQLite database. And there's a lot to choose from. There's between the tablets and the different phone platforms and then the different versions of Android and iOS and then all the apps. There's a lot to choose from. And it's really hard. It's hard for you guys to keep up with what your users want, right? Or you guys all got this buttoned up and I'm just kind of like a dude on a stage talking nonsense. But it's like once you think you've figured it out and you can go back to other projects, there's something new. I've got some other tidbits for you. Like once you've figured out Office 365 and claims rules using IPs between the devices connecting to Office 365, and then iOS 11 comes out. And it changes that on you. There'll be more of these, I promise. Hang on. Wait for the people to look up. It's a funny one. So when you look at the app stores, right? I love the delayed laugh. When you look at the app stores, there's a lot. I mean, for a long time, like iOS had the most apps, and now it's like the Google Play Store. I saw a number, was it September of this year? That Google Play has 3.3 million apps. 1 million more than iPhone. And that number I saw was true in March and May of this year for the iOS app. So it's kind of interesting. You know, why is it a little bit stagnant? There's some overlap and stuff, but there's a lot going on with these apps. And without these apps and what the services they're providing to the users, the data lives everywhere problem wouldn't be a problem. Who likes using an app on their device that's not connecting back to a web service? You got Calc, but almost everything is connecting back to something, isn't it? And what's funny is whenever I talk to people in like app security, they think about the APK file, the IPA, the APPX. It's so hard to say that. Why do they add the X at the end? But they're thinking about what's going on with that app. Are we using certificate pinning? Are we using HTTPS? Did we remember to switch that from the test server to the production server? Like, they're thinking about that. But what they're not always thinking about is what's going on behind it. The data, where it's reaching out to. And you can have that buttoned up and you got certificates. But App Authority, I think it was June this year, found a vulnerability where the app was talking to a cloud service and it was encrypted, but there was another back way into that cloud service that wasn't. And they called it hospital gown. You guys familiar with that one? Because when you're wearing a hospital gown, the front's covered, but the back's not. So it's a cute name. But it's an interesting paper. I recommend you reading it. And it's kind of really indicative of the problem with developers where they think they've got security down, but they kind of miss some of the obvious pieces. And not to say developers suck, but they just don't understand. And it's our responsibility to help them and not work against them. So these apps are there, they've got lots of data, and they're actually really interesting and enriching, and we communicate, and we do all these other cool things, stop shit posting. But the other part of the apps is without this, sometimes you might not know how to dress. What's the weather today? So you got to give these users their apps, but you got to come up with a way to control the data. The other thing is, everything these days is a computer. At GrrCON, for the first time in my life, I saw a bottle of vodka that's Bluetooth enabled. It's so that you can put a little message like, you know, like, I don't know, I'm drunk, I love GrrCON, T-Rex for the win, I don't know. But you could put something on there, and you laugh, but it's true. Bluetooth enabled, we just had Blueborn, and, you know, there's all these attacks that are going on. There's people walking around with badges here today that is keeping track of all the people that have Bluetooth enabled. Yes, turn it off now. If I see you look at your phone, you're guilty. But these guys are walking around with these badges. So there's everything computes. You know, why do we need to have a blender to get on the internet? But somebody wants it. There's even research on sex toys that are Bluetooth enabled and on the internet. I'm not joking. They've been doing this for almost a year. It's a way in, and I don't mean the way in you think I mean. It's a way into your network. So everything computes, and we have to be constantly mindful of that. So that's a part of your mobile data strategy. If you're not thinking about how are my users going out there in the world, what are they connecting with, what are they wearing? Some of this might be obvious for some people, but there's varying degrees in here, and it's important for you guys to keep thinking about that, because it's not slowing down. Who thinks we're winning this battle? Right. Maybe you guys have figured me out and know when not to raise your hand. But we're not winning this battle. We're losing it. Think about why. Also, the power of these things. I don't know, you guys probably heard it. It's like the S8 is more powerful than the Cray 2 from like 30 years ago. That's kind of cool, but kind of scary. Also, like the devices in our pockets are more powerful than what they used to put on the moon, the astronauts. You guys know about that. You probably heard about that. It's old news. But that stuff's kind of cool, but kind of scary, because now your device could be used for mining cryptocurrency without you really being aware of it. Like, things are happening behind the scenes. I have a colleague who said, you know, every once in a while, like, I'm getting these weird pop-ups and things are stopping on it was an Android phone, stopping on my phone, and it gets hot. I'm like, well, you got malware. And he's like, but I can't identify which app because it really doesn't say anything about the app. I'm like, tether it with a wire, install Android Studio if you already didn't have it, ADB logcat. See what's running, capture the logs, sift through it, figure out the package ID, and then you can remove it. But it's like, it takes sometimes that level for someone to figure out how to solve your problems, but yet, do you think the regular users can do that? Hope you're thinking no. So, once again, the issues. You guys are familiar with OWASP, right? How to build a website the right way, and also some of the issues that are out there and kind of how to address them. Also, OWASP Zap, great tool. So this is the mobile version. So there's a link up here from 2016 of the top 10 different type of mobile insecurities that they've found, and kind of really I just highlighted the ones that I see more frequently. The two that are dark are insecure communications and insecure authentication, which even today we're finding that's still a problem, right? And then there's others around improper platform usage. I don't know if you guys could see all that, but insecure data storage, which kind of references more of external storage. A lot of the devices these days tend to get encrypted on their own, iOS and Android specifically. Insufficient cryptography, authorization, client code quality. Talked about that a little bit. Code tampering, so somebody manipulating the code and then making it available somewhere, and then it's like really malware. Reverse engineering. I don't know if that's the big of the problem, but if your developers are building code and they're putting in like the username and password to access the database that's in the web app, that's things you should be catching. That's not good stuff, and that can be found through reverse engineering easily. And then other extraneous functionality. I think it was as much as I didn't like it, I think it was a good decision for Apple when they included NFC as a part of their device to have it restricted at the hardware level to only use Apple Pay. Because otherwise the researchers would have had a field day. But now it's opening up, and they're opening up the APIs with the next versions of the phone, so it's kind of cool, but let's see what happens. The other thing to point out, if you're like, that guy up there, he's talking all this trash, we're already doing this stuff, we got this mobile security thing buttoned up. What the hell is he going to tell me that I already don't know? If this is what you're doing and this is it, or even like a subset of this, This is table stakes. This is where you begin, not where you end. Quickly, MDM enrollment, right? Use something to manage your devices. Make sure there's a PIN or a passcode. You guys think 4 digits is good enough? Are you awake? Is 4 digits good enough? No, but it's better than none, right? Use biometric authentication. So you want a long password? Let the users use biometrics. So this way, at least if they need to unlock their phone for something when they're driving and they shouldn't be, it's safer. Automatic lock. Sounds pretty practical, pretty simple stuff. You should be doing it. Remote wipe of corporate data. So again, if you have some kind of device management and the only way that you can reclaim your data is by destroying the employees, you're doing it wrong. You destroy their photos, the videos of their baby being born, well, videos of the baby after they're born, things like that, that they don't back up, they forget to take off. You're going to be pretty unhappy. So you want to do something they call like selective wipe. Does that sound familiar? Or corporate wipe, which is only your apps and data. But some people think that's enough. Hey, we got the device encrypted. We're cool. Success. But it's a beginning. Controlling the OS version, hard to do with iOS unless the device is supervised and you're using some kind of provisioning profile, like with device enrollment program, or DEP, I just say DEP, device enrollment program. But you could set it up that you can have some kind of control of your OS. Did everybody know that? Yeah. And then, jailbreaking and rooting. I know it's cool to, do that stuff, but not on your corporate device. And you don't want to compromise the OS because you're going to fall prey. But if you're not, so who's doing more than this? Quick show of hands, you could just do a quick dart up if you want. Nobody? Am I not scanning the room properly? Anybody doing more than this? Got a half hand, you're retracted, but I won't point you out. All right, we got a lot to learn. We have a half hour left. All right, so the modern worker, right? Where are they? Anywhere. What are they looking to do? Be productive. They want the best experience. I offended somebody, he has to go. Unless your wife's calling you, say hi for me. Oh, I respect that. But they want privacy, right? They want to keep themselves private. So that's the big thing is well, we want to make sure that we're managing the user's devices, but they don't want us collecting text messages and using location services to see where they are. Well, make sure your MDM doesn't do that. You turn it off. Or have really good role-based administration so that even when you get an inventory of the apps that are on there, IT can't see what's on there. So at Mobile Iron, and this is not a plug, this is just what I do, we have test servers that we use for demos. I love going in the app inventory to find Tinder and other fun apps that are in there. See what they like, Clash Royale, I'm guilty. But just kind of see, what my coworkers do. I'm not saying that they're doing that, but I like to look for it. So that's the modern worker, right? They have these really high expectations. And some of them can go rogue. They're just going to do whatever they want. They're going to not tell you that they're doing it. You can install an MDM and then they can take it off if it's not put on properly. So you want to make sure that while the users are still accessing email, it's under your management. And then when you can kind of learn how to manage your users, work with the lines of business, understand what their mobile strategy as well. It's not just about you, it's with you, not by you. Then you can measure success the way that you think success should be measured, right? Call it your own. Nobody likes the little baby that does this. It's so cute. And then when you look at IT, right, what you guys are doing, you got to be agile, you got to respond to the requests for the users. There's so many things that are changing. We need to get off this legacy mail system. We need to get into the cloud. We're doing expenses in the cloud. We're doing customer relationship in the cloud. Workflow in the cloud. Everything is kind of moving there. And you guys need to be there to be when there's something's not working, don't they expect a response? Just as much as you like the gratification of solving a problem, they like it when you're there to get rid of those problems for them. And they're there. And they don't want the security to get in the way. Who's ever used a security tool that made it really hard for them to just do something very basic and said, this is cool. I want more of this. Hit me harder with that stick that has a little nail sticking out of it. They want that stuff to just work. They don't want the security to get in the way. They want to go into Salesforce, tap the app. It then goes to Salesforce, uses a single sign-on through whatever your IDP is, and then they're in, never entering creds. Does that sound ridiculous? Anyone? It's possible today. That stuff exists. You got to find it. But there's authentication, there's strength, there's encryption going on, traffic is being controlled, and all of that's happening, giving them what they want while keeping your data safe. Who knows what this is? Bonus points if you can call them out, both of them. He raised his hand first. By the proper name. Anyone else? Close. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Yes. Nano, but what's the other one called? The Tetra. Sorry. But we all learned something together. I learned that too. I'm like, that's the Nano. I was like, oh, there's also a Tetra. That's cool. I don't know where they came up with these names. But these are things that could be in your network, right? These are things that if somebody is hired to put this in your network, you probably don't know about it, right? What's the biggest problem that these things in your network can cause for you? Anyone? Correct. Security backdoor. Anything else? A man in the middle. Just having some rogue device on your network that it's collecting data, but you don't know what kind of data. It's doing something. More than likely, somebody has a shell in also. And you don't know when they're going to be on there, and most of the time it's when you're not there. Right? Do you want to be like this guy? I do it a little bit. I don't want to wear overalls, but I like the Yagi. The Yagi antenna is pretty cool. But you don't want to be like scanning. You know what a fox hunt is? You don't want to be like scanning your network with a Yagi antenna, like where are all the rogue access points? I hear these stories, these executives like, well, I want to use Wi-Fi with my device. They drop in a router, plug it into the network. It's under their desk, maybe hidden somewhere. Nobody sees it, and it's there and it's open. Not even configured properly. It's scary, and that's stuff that's going on. It sounds unbelievable, but it's true. So you don't want to be that person walking around with the Yagi antenna, unless it's like after hours and it's a fox hunt and there's beer involved. But you want to try to avoid that stuff. And some of the ways that you can do it is these are other companies. They've got some cool tools and cool integration with different MDMs. So for example, with like Cisco Ice, if you don't know what it is, we'll save that for a chat after. But what you can do is you can integrate your MDM with Ice. And how does that work? You get a rogue device that goes on your network, right? Not managed, you don't know who it is. Ice intercepts it because they're hitting one of the access points that Cisco manages. And it says, oh, Wi-Fi MAC address. Yeah, I know who this is. I got a policy that says your access to the corporate network. Go ahead. Device comes in. Ooh, I don't know who this is. I'm going to send them over to the MDM. Why don't you get enrolled? Poof. I don't know who this is. Go get enrolled. You don't want to get enrolled? Well, I'm just going to give you 4.4 out on the outbound. 443, excuse me. 443 on the outbound. You don't get anything else. So when the devices get enrolled, then they'll get your certificates, they can get on your Wi-Fi, they can access your data. So this is a really good way from a mobile data protection strategy to enroll devices into your MDM without going to the users and building a whole script of, okay, first you have to go to the Apple App Store, but if you have Android, you got to go to the Play, and it has this little symbol instead of that symbol, and then you need to download, MDM agent, and then put in your Active Directory credentials. You got to wait because you're going to get a pop-up. Who wants that? But people do that all the time. It's very common because they don't think about all the different integration points. And that's really very important from an IT standpoint because it's going to make your life a lot easier. You're going to have the visibility and control that you need. Aruba ClearPass does something like this as well as Arrowhide. That's why they're up there. Kind of keep things fair. But you want to do something to capture those rogue devices and send them somewhere where they're either managed or they only get very limited access. It's very important. So we mentioned DEP before, and VPP, Device Enrollment Program, Volume Purchase Program. Show of hands, who's using this today Please raise your hand, be honest. So you're like really high. So we got a few people. And is it working for you? Most part. Good. A head nod. You like it? All right. So I'm going to take a quick drink. But Apple came out with this like a couple, let's say 2.5, 3 years, about 3 years ago now. And we only saw maybe 6 hands go up. Who's using iOS devices and it's a corporate like device and you're getting corporate mail? iOS with corporate mail. I'm using it. A lot of you. And what this does is when it's a corporate-owned device and you make the purchase for this device, you're going to exchange like a token between Apple and your MDM. And when you do this, you sync up those devices. So let's just say you buy your devices from some carrier. And the carrier says, well, it's 100 devices, here's the PO with all the serial numbers. Well, you don't want to type in those serial numbers. You put in the PO number in Apple's DEP. All the serial numbers pop up. They sync down to your MDM. And you have this provisioning profile. And that's a part of the management. And in the provisioning profile, you activate iOS supervision. Now, supervision is not equal to managed. What supervision is, it's another bit that's flipped on your phone. So a consumer version of an iOS device is not supervised. Even if you're enrolled in MDM, it's not supervised. You either need to use the iPhone configurator and tether it directly to then activate supervision and watch it reboot and, force all these other things to happen, or DEP. Corporate-owned devices that are under supervision open up a lot of the enterprise controls you guys want. What kind of controls? Well, on iOS, wouldn't you like it when you push down an app, it just shows up and it doesn't prompt the user? Hey, MDM wants you to install this app. What do you want to do, cancel or install? Users are going to be like either or. These things just show up, and they can also just disappear, which is really cool. And there'd be managed apps. How about controlling operating system updates? You can't do that now. Apple doesn't want you to. But if you're supervised, they kind of met you in the middle ground there. They compromise, and you can prevent the users from doing an update. Why is that important? Maybe you have a custom app that doesn't support the new operating system yet because you're not in the developer program where you get the early release of the version to test your code before things break. So you need to do something about that. So all these things work together. Oh, VPP, Volume Purchase Program, it's essentially was created for license reclamation. So if you need 100 licenses of some paid-for app, and then somebody goes, well, I got a new phone. And kind of this might be the model you're using now, and they download it and then they expense the cost. They just keep putting it on there. Nobody really knows how many times this is happening. But with VPP, you buy them up front, and then as people use them, the licenses get consumed. But when somebody retires their device, you get the license back. So you know what's going on. So what Apple did was if it's a corporate-owned device, you can then add this other thing called device-based app distribution. Who's using that? One person, two, a little hand wave. Good. Is it cool? It's better than using your iTunes ID. So now you got a user that doesn't need their Apple ID to get the apps. A lot of you are probably doing it that way. There is a better way. I'm not saying it's wrong. There's a better way. And if it's a corporate-owned device, this is the way you want to go. So corporate-owned, I don't know if you know the terms COPE and COSU. Corporate-owned, personally enabled. So think of it as your employer says, we love you, welcome aboard. Here's your new Apple device. And you're like, it's a new one. I don't have to use this 5S anymore. And then you put your Apple ID on there. Sky's the limit for you. You can do whatever you want. But the employer can say, well, they're only going to be able to get apps from our app store. They can kind of lock it down a little bit, but personally enabled means you do whatever you want. COSU is corporate-owned specific use. So it's something that has like a very singular purpose. Like a point-of-sale device, maybe on an airline. Who flew in here to GrrCON? Anyone fly? I drove. Okay, not too many flyers. But if you go on an airline and they have like a little phone in their hand and they swipe and you bought a drink or some food from them, that's a COSU device. It's very specific use. And you can do this. You can deploy the apps to the device and not the user. Very, very cool. They all don't need to be in supervised mode, but the difference between device-based app distribution, when it's supervised, it just shows up. When it's not supervised, the user still gets the pop-up. Why is this important? Because you're able to control your data better when it's a supervised device. There's a lot of other things in there. It's really just provisioning, but you know how like when you unbox a new iPhone and it's like, hello, let's get on the network. Here's our terms of service. Would you like to activate Siri? How about location services? And do you want to restore from iCloud? Data breach. Would you like to do this other stuff, right? So you can turn that all off. You can just say, well, we'll let them do none of this. And it just goes away. You can even enforce your MDM agent and prevent the user from taking the MDM agent off. On a BYOD scenario, the user still has the power to remove MDM. Believe it or not, it's true. Your app should be removed as well, and so should your data. And if you can do this, you'll be like this guy. You can call them up. No? Not working. Breaking Bad. Is it too long ago? Is it too long ago? Okay. So they have choice. We get that. I'm going to kind of, for the sake of time, skip through a little bit of this, but I think the important part is security in a context is the most important thing, right? It's really not one size fits all. Security doesn't always work the way with one piece of data that it should work, or an app or service the way it should work with another. Who's using Kerberos for email authentication today? Right? You can launch an app, your mail app. If you're managed, it opens up and it works beautifully. Otherwise, basic off. Put in your credentials. And then you go to the cloud. Does Kerberos exist in Office 365? Nope. User experience changed. Security is contextual. So you got to remember that what works today may not work tomorrow. And what will work? Certificate-based authentication, or CBA. That sounds like a good alternative for email and accessing OneDrive or any other type of cloud storage data. But then SAML 2.0 sound pretty good. Take a little SAML on the side and kind of walk down happy lane, because it's a great way to work with your identity provider for single sign-on. And I kind of already started talking about this. So when you look at like cloud providers and you look through the keyhole, I got some good marketing people help me make these. But on the other side, it's like Office 365, like, and there's still some people still not using it. I love it when I talk to somebody and I'm like, are you thinking about Office 365 in the future? Like, no, we just upgraded to 2013 on Exchange. We're not even looking at that yet until the next 2 versions of Windows. Like, okay. Very rare conversation. Most people are like, yep, we already got something going on. We're testing it. We got IT people in there because they're more forgiving of technology. We're trying to figure this all out. And I think that's like the right approach. And there's someone that said, yeah, you know, it's a new year, new budget. We just kind of moved everybody to Office 365 and we're still kind of dealing with the fallout. I'm getting head nod, yeah. So these are the conversations I have. So trying to, you know, impart some of that, share some of that with you. But there's more than just Office out there. You know, these guys are like moving everything to the cloud. Is that news? No. But what are you going to do to make this all integrate on mobile? So if you sit down and say, all right, we're going to move to Office 365. It's going to save us some money. We're going to be more green. And we're going to be able to reduce our server footprint. And here's the win-win scenario. Sounds cool, right? But what about the other things you're doing? What about Workday? What about Salesforce? What about Concur, ServiceNow, SAP? Like, how are you integrating all that? When you look at these things myopically and just say, this is the cloud service provider and this is the step we're taking forward, and you figure we'll get to these later, remember about mobile? That's when it's going to be happening to you. Okay? You're not going to be able to keep up with the rate of change. And then once you think you've got it buttoned up, it will change. IT dog years, what is it? 3 years for every calendar? Mobile dog years, 1 month is 1 year. And if you don't feel that yet, then you're not doing mobile often enough. You're doing other things. But it moves so fast, when you blink, it's changed. Just changed. So these are just some examples of some popular apps and ways you can like integrate certain things. Definitely consider an IDP for authentication. If you don't know IDP, identity provider, some examples are like Okta, Ping, and even ADFS. You can federate your different services that way, and that works too. And You want to be mindful of this, but also when you're using things like SAML, it kind of helps out. SAML could be a little tricky to get things set up and when you federate your pairs, but then you can move on with life and it's good times. So just a quick example. I'm trying to fly through some of this. Android for Work, now called Enterprise. This is cool. When Lollipop came out, I was so super excited. I wrote a white paper. You'll see it at the end. It's really important because it looks at the different types of regulations that are going on out there in all the different industries and things. Different CISOs kind of help them make a decision because when Android for Work came out, that's what it was originally called. It was a very confusing thing because it was so much stuff at once. And when you think of like, well, what is it? Is it a container? Is it something? It's not a container, and people keep calling that. It's really a work profile. And especially on BYOD, that's exactly what they call it. So when you think about like SE Linux and mandatory access controls, that's effectively what's going on. So every app that gets installed on an Android device, a new user is created, and that user is assigned access to the directory where the data and the configuration sits. But when you're using Android Enterprise, it's like creating a group, and all those apps are in that group, and they're able to share data together because they're in that group without having to do any kind of like crazy permissions. But any of the apps that are outside of that, they can't get in. But IT can configure this so the data can go out if you want it to, like contacts. Maybe that's an issue or not. And you can see, I wanted you guys to see what it looks like with the little kind of briefcase badge that's on the apps. This is a game changer on Android. For a long time, everything pre-Lollipop was like, Android's insecure. We're not letting it on the network. They can get guest access, but we're not putting any corporate data on there. But with Lollipop, it changed everything. Now we're up to Oreo, but it changed everything because one of the big problems with Android is unless it was like a custom or an in-house app, when you wanted to like deploy it using like an MDM, it just wouldn't show up. Like supervised mode on it was just, hey. But now it's like, I got to download it, and it's like all this work, and the users get angst. But when you authorize these apps, and again, think about data protection. When a user goes, I'm going to change the paradigm for a second. When the user goes to the Play Store and they download an app, what's that thing that comes up right before install? Permissions. The manifest XML file, Android manifest.xml, shows the permissions and the intents that the app has. And what do the users usually do? Click! They don't read it! Whoa, that would be bad. Trying to be like theatrical. They just click, and you guys have to deal with the fallout. But with Android Enterprise, when you go to like the Google Play like work store, you look at those permissions. You get to decide. And what's even cooler is when the permissions change, you're notified that there's changes, and it shows you what the changes are. And if there's something in there that doesn't jive with you, spidey senses are tingling, this doesn't look good, against our corporate policy, you don't have to update it. And the users don't get upgrades. And they can't. They can't go to the public store and install a for-work app. They have to go only to the public store, the public store for public apps that can't get in, and only from your MDM to get the work apps or the enterprise apps. I think Google changed the name earlier this year. So does that make sense? And if it's a device-owned app, so they'll have like double icons, single binary. So if it's like contacts, there's one binary contact, and then there's the contacts icon without the briefcase and the one with the briefcase. And when you click either one, you don't get prompted for like, log into the container. They just added that feature, but you don't have to have it. And like, log into the container and you unlock the sandbox and then you can get stuff. You just boop, here's my contacts. I'm going to flip. I'm going to go to my personal. Oh, look, there's my personal. It's like, it's beautiful because it's the same app, but different data. There's data segregation, which is what you want. And then when you remove like the device from management, bloop, 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 all the different apps disappear, and your data too. When you talk about threat protection, there's more choices than this. There's a lot of companies out there. Who has mobile threat protection or any kind of app reputation in their environment now if you're deploying apps to your users? The yellow shirt guy? No. You are? Cool. Unfortunately, that's about the percentage out there. There's some really good companies doing some really phenomenal work for mobile app reputation and threat protection. You should be investigating this. This is a part of that strategy because if the app is exfiltrating data from the device, you're most likely not going to know about it until it's too late. So look at some threat protection. It shouldn't be like, we're going to do the MDM this year, and then we got the budget for this other thing and this other thing, and then we get to app reputation and threat protection. Day one. Username and passwords equal security or not? I'm getting head shakes. No, it's not, but we're still using them quite frequently, and they're trying to get longer and more complex, and it's just getting harder to keep track of them. And should we be reusing passwords like every site? No. This is getting a really hard thing to keep up with from a personal as well as a business standpoint. So you want to like, there's some other marketing stuff. I might jump through this quicker. But like the unsecured device, right? It's, you know, it's off. You want to unlock it. It's there. And then the secured device should have the passcode. But you get right into the app, right? Unsecured, you get right into the phone. You can see the app, go to see the data. Secured, you got to type in a passcode in order to get to the apps. Did I really need to explain that? You guys got that, right? I'm going to fly through some of this stuff. Oh, managed and unmanaged apps. This is an important concept to understand. An unmanaged app is an app that comes from the public app store that the user installed, not from your MDM. An app that comes from your MDM is managed. Why is that important? Because with managed apps, you can have rules on how it gets installed, how it gets removed. Do you want to stop the iTunes backup? Do you want it to be removed when management's removed? So if it's BYOD and they uninstall your MDM, then you want that app and that data to be removed. That's managed. Unmanaged, anything goes. And you don't want managed and unmanaged to talk together. So if you can come up with a way with like containerization, you guys sound familiar with that? Like on an app level and have rules about which apps can exchange data? Is that 5 or 10? Okay, it's 10. Oh, good. I might actually finish this time. That's an important thing. Those are passcodes. All right, I think there's like something happening here that's supposed to be a telltale sign of what's going on. Managed and unmanaged. All right, let's move on. All right, yeah. Security risk with unmanaged, managed apps are good. Who's heard of PerApp VPN? All right. So in iOS 7, they included APIs in the operating system so that when the apps are built to work with those APIs, what you do is you tap the app. You do need an MDM for this. You tap the app. The app is then creating a VPN tunnel just for itself back into your network. So if you're going and using some other traditional, we'll just call it traditional VPN, and they launch it, put in a code, you might get a Duo push or something. Mentioning a Michigan company. You get a little Duo push. Yay, Duo! And then they're able to get in. Well, that's cool. God, my wife's calling me. Should I answer the phone? Be like, I'm on stage. I can't really talk right now. She keeps calling me. Stop. So you have this push, and you use the Duo push. You get into the network. But all of these apps now have access to the network. I don't think that's something that you want to happen, right? You want just, it's kind of like least privilege. You just want the app to access what it needs to, not everything else. So that's what PerApp VPN does. Here's some slides. There you go. And one more. So you launch the app. Some certificate stuff's happening. You use certificate-based authentication between the device and the gateway. You want that encrypted, obviously. The gateway checks the device and then forwards the request as long as the device is at the minimum security posture that you've defined. Then it gets into your internal network. Then it can go to SharePoint. Or then it can go and get your email or whatever. I worked with a company, I have a customer that's here in Michigan, which was kind of cool to see them do this because I haven't seen anyone do this yet. They use PerApp VPN because when the users had this app installed and they were on the internal network, they can hit the internal server and listen to the voice messages that came from their desk. But you're like in the office, you could just go to your desk and do that. They've been wanting forever to be able to do it when they're not at their desk, which is when it's really important. So with PerApp VPN, they were able to launch the app, it connected back, all the magic happens, then they hit the server, and then they were able to listen to their voice messages anywhere in the world. I always get chills when I talk about that. It was a cool project to work on. But that's kind of the cool things you can do. And because none of the data is really sitting there on the device, so data protection doesn't really become as big of an issue, as much as if it was like being pulled down, like using like email. So PerApp VPN, and depending on the MDM you use, they might only work with iOS, but you want one that'll cover all the major operating systems. We talked about authentication a little bit. I'm going to skip it because here's another more interesting thing. So if you're using Office 365 and you set up, you're using ADFS and you set up IP claims rules with ADFS, and you think like, we got this buttoned up. We're only going to let certain devices going through a proxy to hit mail, and that's how authentication is going to happen. So we know people can't like configure their other personal devices to get access to the mail service. Well, when iOS 11 came out, they finally made that OAuth feature available. And with OAuth, what it's going to do is it's going to really kind of bypass all those sets of claims rules. So it's because it's using a different kind of authentication service. And what's happening, where is this? Okay. So what's happening is the user goes and logs into mail. Then there's this thing called iOS accounts. Is this a demo? Oh yeah, I guess it's doing that. It uses this thing called iOS accounts, and the user gets a prompt that says, oh, by the way, do you want to grant iOS accounts permission in order to handle your login from going forward? So what do you think the users are going to do? And they do that, and then going forward, there's this little thing in Office 365 called iOS accounts for the user that's helping them handle the authentication through OAuth. That's a really simple way of describing it. That completely bypasses your IP claim rules. So you got to go in there. There's a couple ways of handling it, but like with a CASB or something. But if you go into Office 365, you've got to find the iOS accounts and shut that off, and don't let it do it. That's a demo for something else. So let's go through the mobile data protection checklist. Make sure it's happening by or with you. All right? You have a way to control rogue devices. Look at the native security features that are available from the hardware or the operating system manufacturer, like DEP and VPP. It might save your bacon someday. Check out the app connections. Again, PerApp VPN, it's using certificates in order to handle the authentication, and it's controlling only access from that app. Talk to the lines. She's calling me again. The lines of business. Work with your users, right? Work with them. Understand what their strategies are and what they want to do instead of finding out that they've done it and now you need to react. Take the time to talk to them. And always expect it to change. Don't ever stop thinking. Don't ever become complacent because you think you've done it all. This iOS 11 thing caught a lot of companies off guard with the OAuth. So I'm sharing that with you before it happens to you if it already hasn't. And if you could do all this stuff and maybe even more, you could be like Borat. Great success. Now, if you're like, wait a minute, dude, there's so many other things you didn't cover. We never talked about kiosks and ways to lock those down. We never talked about app virtualization. We didn't talk about the app config community, which probably almost none of you heard about. You never heard about we didn't talk about conditional access. I kind of did a little bit when I mentioned CASB. We didn't talk about identity that much. You mentioned Kerberos, but really you didn't go through it completely. And what the fuck about this? What about GDPR, man? This is going to be hitting my company pretty hard next year. So we didn't talk about this. And you know why? It's just too much. I didn't have enough time. But maybe I'll make like a follow-up talk about and kind of cover those other things. Would it be worthwhile? Was this helpful? Thank you. Big thumbs up. I got one person that'll show up next year. Thank you, sir. And remember, stay paranoid because they're coming for you. Don't ever forget it. Here's the plug on the white paper. Just do a quick search on /for work enterprise. Android, what is it? Top 8 security concerns every CISO should know. Just search on that. You'll get the PDF, and it's got a lot of pages, but just go to the sections that apply to your industry. But it was pretty fun to write. In fact, they actually made it shorter than what I wrote, which, yeah. But thank you, you guys. Thank you, GrrCON, right? GrrCON! Thank you, Mobile Iron. I think this was pretty awesome. You guys are a great audience. Thank you so much. And I don't think we have time for questions, do we? I think the next speaker is like, dude, you're cutting into my time. But if you want to talk to me, well, I'll go outside and I can answer your questions.